are sitting on your toilet, do you really know what is laying underneath? The date is February 28th, 1989. The sun is setting over the snow-covered hills of Miyakoji Village in Fukushima, Japan. The air is biting cold. A young primary school teacher, Ms. A, returns to her dormitory after a long weekend away. The house is quiet. It sits isolated near the edge of the school grounds, backed by a dark line of trees. She enters the restroom, a small, unheated space with an old-fashioned Japanese squat toilet set into the tiled floor. As she glances down, something catches her eye. Deep inside the porcelain bowl, down in the dark throat of the plumbing where the water should be clear, she sees something unnatural. It looks like a shoe. Confused and unsettled, she rushes outside to the back of the building to check the concrete access hatch of the septic tank, the clean-out lid. The heavy concrete lid has been displaced. It is slightly open, a black crescent moon against the snow. She shines a flashlight into the abyss of the waste tank. The beam cuts through the darkness and lands on something pale, floating in the filth. It is a human leg. Inside a pipe meant for waste. Barely 14 inches wide, a man is jammed tight. He is cold, he is rigid, and he is not moving. What the police find inside that tank will become one of the most baffling locked room puzzles in modern history. A scenario that, according to the laws of physics, should never have happened. This is L.J. Easton. Welcome to Eastern Shadows. Today, we return to the Fukushima Septic Tank Mystery, a case that officially closed as a bizarre accident brought on by sexual deviance. But beneath the official ink lies a story of impossible physics, destroyed evidence, and a village that whispered of a political assassination covered up by the state. Let's step into the shadows. To understand the horror of the end, we must understand the promise of the beginning. Miyakoji Village, 1989. It was the end of the Showa era, a tight-knit rural community where doors were left unlocked, but where everyone watched everyone else. This region lived in the shadow of giants, the nuclear power plants that dotted the Fukushima coastline. The local economy, the politics, and the jobs were all tethered to the energy infrastructure powering distant Tokyo. At the center of this community was 26-year-old Naoyuki Kano. Kano was the antithesis of a drifter or a loner. He was a pillar. He worked as a maintenance manager at a company servicing the nuclear plants, a responsible, high-stakes job. He was intelligent, physically fit, and deeply charismatic. He served as the tireless leader of the local youth association, organizing sports events and festivals. Friends described him as serious, cheerful, the kind of young man village elders trusted implicitly. He had a bright future, and sources indicate he was on the verge of proposing to his girlfriend. He had a good name, he had a future, he had everything to lose. But Kano was also a man with a voice in a village that preferred silence. In the weeks leading up to his death, the village was locked in a vicious mayoral election, divided between pro-nuclear and anti-nuclear factions. Rumors swirled that the influential young Kano was shifting his support away from the establishment, threatening millions of yen in contracts and subsidies. He was standing in the light. But on a freezing Friday night in February, he would step into the dark. The timeline shifts to Friday, February 24th. Kano was at home with his parents. Around evening, he told his father, "I'm going out for a while," and left in his white sedan. He headed to a farewell party for a senior colleague at a local bar. Witnesses recall Kano being in good spirits. There were no fights, no shadows hanging over him. He left the gathering around 1 a.m. on Saturday, February 25th, stepping out into the freezing winter night. And then total silence. Now Yuki Kano vanished. When he didn't return home the next morning, his parents knew something was wrong. Kano was responsible. He always called. The family began a frantic search. For 3 days, nothing. Then, a lead. His white sedan was found. It was parked in a gravel lot near the teacher's dormitory, the home of Ms. A, the woman who would eventually find his body. The car's condition was strange. The doors were unlocked. Some reports say the keys were still in the ignition. Others say they were in his pocket. But the engine was stone cold. It had been there for days. Why would a respectable youth leader park near a single woman's dormitory in the middle of the night? The teacher, Ms. A, had been away for the weekend. When she returned on Tuesday, February 28th, she felt an unease in her home. Before leaving, she had been receiving prank calls, silent, heavy breathing on the line. The air felt charged with a threat she couldn't see. She didn't know it yet, but she was walking on top of a crime scene. While the village searched the woods for Kano, he was already directly beneath her floorboards. February 28th. Police and the fire brigade arrived under the glare of floodlights. The rescue team initially assumed they could simply pull the man out. They were wrong. The septic system was a concrete box buried underground. A pipe, shaped like the letter U, connected the tank to the toilet inside the house. The man's body was jammed into the bend of this U-shaped pipe. He was wedged so tightly that pulling on his legs accomplished nothing. The authorities had to bring in an excavator. They dug up the frozen earth, craned the entire concrete tank out of the ground, and had to smash the pipe with pickaxes to extract him. When now Yuki Kano's body was finally laid on the snow, the details sent a shiver through the crowd. He was shirtless in the dead of winter. He was clutching his folded jacket tightly to his chest. He was facing upward toward the toilet seat with his knees bent. And then the realization that made no sense. The opening of the pipe was only 36 centimeters in diameter, about 14 inches. Kano's shoulder width was approximately 40 centimeters. He was physically wider than the pipe he was inside. To get into that position voluntarily, he would have had to strip naked in freezing weather, squeeze through a hole smaller than his shoulders, maneuver down a waist-filled pipe in pitch darkness while holding his clothes, and twist his body to face upward. Reenactments have since shown this to be nearly impossible for an adult male to do alone.
うわ、もう洋服の上からですけど、擦過傷っていうかもう擦れちゃいましたね。擦れちゃいました。事件の直前の直之さん、身長は 169.2 センチ、体重が 69.5 キロなんですが、
僕は170の、体重が、65キロ。
65キロということは4キロほど直之さんの方が重い、大きいということですから、だとするともっとこのマンホールから入るのは大変だってことですよね。そうですね。
The physical reality screamed that this could not happen. But what the police did next was even more shocking. The Miharu police station made a decision almost immediately. They ruled the death an accident. Their official theory, now Yuki Kano, was a peeping Tom. They claimed he drove to the teacher's house, stripped to reduce his size, and voluntarily crawled into the septic tank to look up her skirt. They concluded he got stuck and died of freezing and suffocation. Case closed. The criminal was the dead man, but the investigation, or lack thereof, was riddled with suspicious behavior that pointed away from an accident. First, the police ordered the body washed immediately, before a full forensic exam. The grime of the tank was scrubbed away. If there were bruises from being held down, or fingerprints from attackers on his skin, they were destroyed in minutes. Second, the pipe itself, the only thing that could prove if he was forced in, was broken apart and quickly discarded. Critics argued that if Kano had been jammed in against his will, the interior concrete would have held scratch marks from his fingernails or shoes as he resisted. That evidence vanished. And then, the most damning piece of physical evidence, the second shoe. One shoe was found in the tank, near his head. But the other shoe was discovered hundreds of meters away, on a riverbank. If Kano walked to the tank to peep, why was he wearing only one shoe? Why was the other one near a river? The police had no answer, but the villagers did. The physical evidence didn't point to a pervert tragically stuck. It pointed to a man who was attacked elsewhere, incapacitated, and then transported to the tank to be disposed of. If the police theory was physically impossible, what actually happened? As the shock wore off, the village of Miyakoji began to whisper. Darker theories emerged to fill the void left by the police's hasty conclusion. At first, some speculated about a crime of passion. Kano and the teacher, Ms. A, were acquaintances. She had been receiving prank calls, and Kano had allegedly helped her record them for the police. A theory arose that Ms. A's boyfriend, driven by jealousy, might have killed Kano, suspecting an affair or believing Kano himself was the stalker. But this theory faltered. How could one angry boyfriend single-handedly force an athletic man into that tiny pipe without leaving massive trauma on the body? It didn't fit. Then a much colder, more terrifying theory took hold. One that explained the impossible positioning of the body and the desperate police cover-up. The nuclear theory. Kano wasn't just a youth leader involved in a contentious election. He was an insider at the nuclear plants. Just weeks before Kano disappeared, a senior colleague in charge of a reactor at the nearby Fukushima Daiichi plant had committed suicide. Rumors were rampant that this suicide was actually a cover-up for a critical mechanical failure that the company wanted to hide. The prevailing belief among many villagers and subsequent researchers is that Kano knew the truth. He had become a whistleblower. The theory posits that Kano was not killed by a lone jealous lover, but by a group of professional enforcers working for powerful energy interests. They intercepted him after the party near the riverbank, where his shoe was found. It would take multiple men to strip him and force his unconscious or semi-conscious body into that pipe. It was a perfect sadistic disposal method. It didn't just hide the body. If discovered, it would permanently destroy his reputation, ensuring no one would ever believe his claims about the plant. This theory also explained the police behavior. In a town dominated by nuclear money, local authorities would be under immense pressure to bury a murder that implicated their benefactors. The police branded Kano a deviant, but the people who knew him refused to accept this second death, the death of his honor. In an unprecedented act of defiance in rural Japan, over 4,000 villagers, nearly half the entire population of Miyakoji, signed a petition. They presented it to the police, demanding the case be reopened as a homicide. They staked their own reputations on Kano's innocence. The police refused to budge. They stood by the peeping Tom verdict. The coroner officially estimated Kano died around February 26th, 2 days after he went missing. This means he may have been alive inside that dark, freezing pipe for over 24 hours before he finally succumbed to the cold. The teacher, Ms. A, traumatized by living above a dying man, fled the village soon after. The village was left with a deep, unhealed scar, a belief that they were living under a system that would protect power over truth, even if it meant crushing one of their brightest sons. Decades later, the Fukushima Septic Tank Mystery remains one of Japan's most disturbing cold cases. It is a staple of occult magazines and true crime forums, a story that refuses to fade. It haunts us because of the claustrophobia, the nightmare of being trapped in the dark. But it also haunts us because of the injustice. The statute of limitations for murder has long expired. Even if a deathbed confession were made today, no one could be prosecuted. Naoyuki Kano remains, legally, a victim of his own misadventure. But in the minds of thousands, the truth lies buried with him in the cold earth of Fukushima, a secret kept by a 36-centimeter pipe. Do you believe the official story, or do you think powerful forces silence Naoyuki Kano? Let us know your theory in the comments below. For more investigations into the shadows of the East, please subscribe and like this video. I'm LJ Easton. Be safe, and I will see you next time.